Hi, and welcome to today's current news. Today is Thursday, May 16th, 2024. Crew trapped on Baltimore Bridge, 7 weeks after bridge collapse. As a controlled explosion rocked the Dolly on Monday, nearly 24 sailors remained on board, below deck in the massive ship's hull. The simultaneous blasts sent pieces of Baltimore's once iconic Francis Scott Key Bridge into the dark waters of Maryland Patapsco River. 7 weeks after its collapse left 6 people on the bridge dead and the Dolly marooned. Authorities and the crew hope that the demolition will mark the beginning of the end of a long process that has left the 21 men on board trapped and cut off from the world, thousands of miles from their homes. But for now, it remains unclear when they will be able to return home. The Dolly, a 948-foot container ship, was at the start of a 27-day journey from Baltimore to Sri Lanka when it struck the Francis Scott Key Bridge, sending thousands of tons of steel and cement into the Patapsco. It left the ship stranded under a massive expanse of shredded metal. The preliminary NTSB report found that 2 electrical blackouts disabled equipment ahead of the incident, and noted that the ship lost power twice in the 10 hours leading up to the crash. The crew, made up of 20 Indians and a Sri Lanka national, who has been unable to disembark because of visa restrictions, a lack of required shore passes, and parallel ongoing investigations by the National Transportation Safety Board and FBI. On Monday, the crew remained on board, even as authorities used small explosive charges to deliberately cut an expanse of the bridge lying on the ship's bow. Ahead of the controlled demolition, the U.S. Coast Guard Admiral Shannon Gilreath said that the crew would remain below deck with a fire crew at the ready. They're part of the ship. They are necessary to keep the ship staffed and operational, Adam Gilreath said. They're the best responders on board the ship themselves. While the ship is likely to be refloated this week, it remains unclear when it will be able to make the 2 nautical mile journey to port. A sad situation. Among those who have been in touch with the crew is Joshua Messick, Executive Director of the Baltimore International Seafarers Center, a nonprofit organization that works to protect the rights of mariners. According to Mr. Messick, the crew has been left largely without communication with the outside world for a couple of weeks after their mobile phones were confiscated by the FBI as part of the investigation. They can't do any online banking. They can't pay their bills at home. They don't have any of their data or anyone's contact information, so they're really isolated right now, Mr. Messick said. They just can't reach out to the folks they need to, or even look at the pictures of their children before they go to sleep. It's a really sad situation. The plight of sailors also attracted the attention of 2 unions representing them, the Singapore Maritime Officers Union and the Singapore Organization of Seamen. In a joint statement on May 11th, the union said that morale has understandably dipped, driven by unfounded fear of personal criminal liability and emotional distress. The statement also called for the swift return of the crew's phones, noting that losing communication with family members is causing significant hardship for crew members with young children at home. Dave Heindel, the president of the Seafarers International Union, said that however long the investigation takes, the crew's rights and welfare should not be infringed upon. We call on the authorities to be mindful that seafarers utilize mobile devices to conduct personal business, for bill payments, and more important, transfer money to their home country to sustain families, he said. Crew members are becoming demoralized without the basic tools we all take for granted. Andrew Middleton, who runs Apostleship of Sea, a program that ministers 2 ships coming through Baltimore, told the BBC he visited the sailors 2 weeks ago and found them in good spirits despite constant worries. Once we broke the ice and got everyone to say their name and what part of India they were from, and talk about it if they were married or had children, we got the ball rolling, he said. They were willing to kind of poke fun at one another a little bit. We did our best to get them laughing and joking, hopefully to take their mind off things for even a few minutes. Next steps. For the time being, the crew has been given SIM cards and temporary mobile phones without data included, according to Mr. Masick. They also received care packages from various community groups and private individuals, which in recent weeks have included batches of Indian snacks and handmade quilts. The BBC has reached out to the Unified Command, overseeing the government's response to Dolly and the bridge collapse, for clarity on when the sailors might be able to leave the ship and eventually repatriated. Daryl Wilson, a spokesperson for Sindri Marine and the Dolly Singapore-based management company, told the BBC that the crew is holding up well and that company representatives dispatched to Baltimore have been checking on them constantly from day one. All their needs are being met to the best of our ability, Mr. Wilson said, adding that shipments of catered Indian food have been sent aboard to allow the cooks to rest. Various religious representatives, including Hindu priests, have been providing services and emotional support to those on board. It's small things to us, he said, but those are big morale boosters. Mr. Wilson, however, said he was unable to provide a timeline for the crew to disembark, noting, in addition to the investigations, nobody knows the ship better than they do, and they are integral for it to function. Mr. Messick says he expects to be able to board the ship to provide emotional support as soon as it is moved out of the shipping channel. After that, he believes that small groups of sailors, perhaps 5 at a time, will be eligible for shore passes, albeit with heavy restrictions on their movements. They will, for example, likely be required to have an escort for the duration of their time on shore. I'm trying to find out what the crew wants to do. I don't want to take them to a baseball game if they are going to be bored, he said. So I've reached out to a local cricket club to see if they can organize a match. Some crew members, such as the ship's captain, expressed an interest in being somewhere contemplative, in nature, Mr. Messick said. We're just trying to help them breathe a bit, he said. They've been stuck on this board this whole time. They need to enjoy a little more of the freedom that we enjoy every day. Why children with disabilities are missing school and losing skills. On a recent school day in Del Norte County, California, in one of the state's northernmost school districts, 17-year-old Emma Lenover sits at home on the couch. In some ways, Emma is a typical teen. She loves Disneyland and dance class, but she has already faced more adversity than some classmates will in a lifetime. All of October and all of November, there was no school because there was no aid, says Emma's mother, Melanie Lenover, leaning her elbows into the kitchen table. Emma has multiple health conditions, including cerebral palsy. She uses a wheelchair, a feeding tube, and is nonverbal. To communicate, she uses a special device, like an iPad, that speaks a word or phrase when she presses the corresponding button. She's also immunocompromised and has mostly done school from home this year, over Zoom. With help from an aide in the classroom, at least, that's what was supposed to happen. Melanie Lenover says her daughter's special education plan with the district guarantees her a dedicated one-on-one aide, but the district is in the throes of a special education staffing crisis. In the fall, without an aide, Emma has had to stop school. As a result, she missed out on the dance and art classes she loves and regressed on her communication device. The fact that a district could struggle so mightily with a special education staffing that students are missing school, that's not just a Del Norte problem. A recent federal survey of school districts across the U.S. found special education jobs are among the hardest to staff, and vacancies were widespread. But what's happening in Del Norte is extreme, which is why the Lenovers and 5 other families are suing the school district, as well as state education leadership, with help from the Disability Rights Education and Defense Fund. The California Department of Education says it cannot comment on pending litigation. It's very, 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 very difficult when we are trying to bring people on board, trying to provide these services when we want the best that we can give, because that's our job, and we can't, says Del Norte Superintendent Jeff Harris. Harris says he cannot comment on the lawsuit, but acknowledges the staffing crisis in Del Norte is very real. Emma Lenover works through literacy lessons at home with special education teacher Sarah Elton. Emma loves these visits, and on this day, waited anxiously at the picture window for Elston to arrive. In December, after the lawsuit was filed, District Special Educator Sarah Elston told the local Wild Rivers Outpost, "Just a few days ago, I had 2 or 3 aides call out sick. They weren't coming to work. And so this starts my morning, at 5:30, having to figure out who's going to be with the student. It is constant crisis management that we do in special education today." Del Norte's isolation makes it more difficult to hire needed staff. The district sits hidden away like a secret between Oregon, the frigid Pacific, and some of the largest redwood trees in the world. It's too isolated, and the pay is not competitive enough, Harris says. To attract workers from outside Del Norte, locally, these aides, like the one Emma requires, earn about as much as they would working at McDonald's. Harris has even tried hiring contractors from Oregon, but it's a 2-hour drive from Southern Oregon here, Harris says, so 4 hours of the paid contract time was not even serving students. The district's hiring process is also too burdensome, according to Harris, taking weeks to fill a job. Hoping to change that, the district declared a special education staffing state of emergency earlier this year, but the problem remains. In April, the district still had more than 40 special education job openings posted. Melanie Lenover says she knows supporting Emma can be challenging, but decades ago, Congress made clear, through the Federal Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, that her daughter is legally entitled to that support. The federal government said it would cover 40% of the cost of providing special education services, but it has never come close to fulfilling that promise. In 2023, the National Association of Elementary School Principals said, since the law was enacted, the closest the federal government has come to reaching the 40% commitment was 18% in 2004 to 2006. The current funding is at less than 13%. All this leaves Melanie Lenover chafing at what she considers a double standard for children with disabilities. If it'd been one of my typically functioning kids who are not in school for 2 months, the school district would be coming after me, Lenover says. In many places, a child who has missed about 18 school days, far less than Emma, is considered chronically absent. It's a crisis that triggers a range of emergency interventions. Lenover says Emma's absences weren't treated with nearly the same urgency. While Emma Lenover still doesn't have a dedicated aide, she's finally getting help. We said, as a team, enough is enough, says Sarah Elston, who is Emma's special education teacher. We're going to do whatever it takes to get this girl an education. Elston has been working with her high school principal to patch together as much help as they can for Emma, including shifting a classroom aide to help Emma participate in one of her favorite classes remotely, dance. How the staffing shortage can become dangerous. Linda Bang is another plaintiff in the Del Norte lawsuit, alongside Emma, Lenover's parents. On a recent Thursday, she sits at her kitchen table, her back to a refrigerator covered with family photos. She grips her phone hard, like a lifeline, watching old photos of her son, Sean. The cell phone videos show a young boy with a broad smile, being urged by his mother to pull up his socks, or being taught by his doting sister to ride a scooter, or dressed up for what appears to be a wedding, and doing the chicken dance. He is a joyful kid. Much has changed since then. Sean Isidomunian, changed by Vang and his attorneys in the lawsuit, were not using his real name because Sean is a minor and his mother asked us to protect his identity. To understand Sean's role in the lawsuit and the depths of Del Norte's staffing crisis, we have to understand what happened to him on Tuesday, February 28, 2023. He was 15 at the time. Sean has autism and is nonverbal, and as part of his special education plan, he gets his own dedicated aide at school. But again, because of Del Norte's struggles to hire enough special education staff, those aides are often in short supply and undertrained. Sean's teacher that day, Brittany Wyckoff, says when he grew frustrated in class, his fill-in aide did not follow procedure. It was snack time, but this staff said, "No, you're not being calm," and pulled the snack away. So that wasn't the appropriate way to handle it. Another staff member later told police Sean had begun to calm down, but the aide still wouldn't give him the snack. Pistachios. Instead, Wyckoff says the aide used a firm tone and continued to tell Sean to calm down. Sean got more agitated, hitting himself in the face. The aide later told the police he began to worry Sean might try to bite him, because Sean had bitten other staff before. Witnesses told police he warned Sean, "You will not bite me. You will not bite me." Wyckoff says standard procedure when a student gets agitated and potentially violent is to move classroom furniture, a table, a desk, between your body and the student. Instead, Wyckoff says, this aide moved furniture out of the way. When Sean moved toward the aide, unobstructed, the aide raised his hands. The staff member just instantly reached out and choked Sean, Wyckoff remembers, and full on, like one hand over the other hand choke. Multiple staff told police. Sean had not tried to bite the aide, Wyckoff says. She was yelling to the aide to stop and finally pulled him off of Sean, who was turning purple. How the incident led to missed school. The aide left school after choking Sean and went to a local bar for a beer, according to the police report. He later told police he'd acted in self-defense. When he was arrested for child endangerment and asked why he hadn't called police himself, the aide said because he had been in similar situations and didn't think this rose to that level. The district attorney ultimately chose not to file charges. Linda Vang says the incident changed Sean. He became less trusting and was scared to return to the classroom. It is the hardest thing in my life to watch my son go through this. To make matters worse, after the incident, the school couldn't provide Sean with a new aide, and like Emma Lenover, he couldn't do school without one. After the encounter, he was forced to miss 2 months of school because of the staffing crisis. It was just a week after telling us, there's no staff, Vang remembers. I feel for him. I'm angry for him. I'm upset for him. It's hard. Again, Superintendent Jeff Harris can't comment on the specifics of the lawsuit or on the incident involving Sean, but he defends the district. We don't come in every day going, how can we mess with people's lives? We come in every day going, what can we do today to make this work? Sean, like Emma, lost skills during his time away from school. His mother says he struggled more to control his behavior and was less willing to use his communication device. Sean is back at school and finally improving, Vang says. He even likes the aide he has now. It has been very hard the last year, but we're getting there. I'm doing my best every single day. With inadequate staff, students can lose vital skills. Wyckoff, Sean's former teacher, says the staff shortage is so acute that some aides are being hired with little to no special education experience. They could know absolutely nothing about working with a student with special needs, Wyckoff says. And the district is like, hey, you've got to work with the most intensely behaviorally challenging students. Good luck. Wyckoff says the district is able to hire, need more, and better training too. The stakes are just too high. Superintendent Harris says the district does provide staff training, but he also has to balance that with this need to get staff into classrooms quickly. Veteran special education staff in Del Norte tell NPR they've seen what happens when students with disabilities don't get consistent quality support. They lose skills. One particular student, he was doing well, says Emily Caldwell, a speech language pathologist in the district. We were talking about removing his communication device from coming to school because he is communicating verbally. Caldwell works with many students who, like Sean and Emma, use a communication device. This student, though, has been learning to use his own voice. It was a big deal, Caldwell says, but the student began losing those skills as he was shuffled between inexperienced staff. Now he's not communicating verbally at school anymore. He's only using his device, and only when prompted, Caldwell says. I have a student whose toileting skills have regressed, says Sarah Elston, Emma's teacher. I have more than one student who have lost skills on their communication device. That is their only way of communicating with the world. This sense of loss, Elston says, keeps her up at night. Superintendent Jeff Harris acknowledges the effects of the staffing crisis have been painful. Have you had a child who can't do something that they were able to do because they don't have that consistency? That's hard. I mean, that's a knife to the heart. Looking forward, the lawsuit against Del Norte Unified School District and state education officials is ongoing. The families hope it will not only help their children, but also raise awareness around a crisis they know is larger than themselves and larger than Del Norte. In the meantime, Del Norte teachers are doing everything they can to support their students with disabilities. Elston, Wyckoff, and Caldwell all say they have raised alarms with the district around students not getting the support they're entitled to, and even being mistreated by untrained or inexperienced staff. Caldwell says some veteran staff have quit out of frustration, though she insists she's staying. I just worry, Caldwell says, tearing up. The kids I work with, most of them don't communicate effectively without support, and so they can't go home and be like, hey mom, so-and-so held me in a chair today. And so I feel like if I wasn't there, and if I wasn't being that voice and the advocate, who would be? Slavic PM Robert Fico fights for life after assassination attempt.
Just coming into us, reports from Slovakia say there has been a shooting after a government meeting outside the capital, Bratislava.
Ja som počula 3, ale možno mohli by to za sebou vnácať. Ako keď lobuchy stúpate na čelenie.
This is not an isolated incident, unfortunately. The political climate in Slovakia, in my home country, was very polarized for a number of years. There were other politicians that were receiving threats, including the current president Čaputová.
Som šokovaná. Všetci sme šokovaní. Fyzický útok na predsedu vlády je predovšetkým útok na človeka, ale je to aj útok na demokraciu. Nenávistná retorika, ktorej sme v spoločnosti svedkami, vedie k nenávistným činom. Prosím vás, zastavme to.
Slavic Prime Minister Robert Fico is fighting for his life in hospital after being shot in small town northeast Bratislava. On Wednesday evening, Defense Minister Robert Kalinak said Mr. Fico had been in surgery for over 3 hours and that the situation was bad. Slavic politicians, including the president, have called the shooting an attack on democracy. The alleged assailant was detained at the scene, but has not yet been formally identified by the authorities. Earlier on Wednesday evening, Defense Minister Robert Kalinak said Mr. Fico had been in surgery for over 3 hours and the situation was bad. The attack happened at about 14:30 in Handlova, about 180 kilometers from the capital, Bratislava, as Mr. Fico greeted people in front of a cultural community center where a government meeting had been held. Footage showed a man raising a gun and firing 5 times at the Prime Minister before being subdued by bodyguards while the other members of Mr. Fico's security detail took the Prime Minister into his car. He was airlifted by helicopter to a nearby hospital before being flown to another hospital in Banska Bystrica, east of Handlova. Later on Wednesday, Slovakia's Deputy Prime Minister Tomas Taraba told the BBC that he believed that Mr. Fico's procedure in hospital had gone well. "I guess in the end he will survive," Mr. Taraba said, adding, "He is not in a life-threatening situation at this moment." At a press conference on Wednesday, Interior Minister Matas Suchat said Mr. Fico had been shot in the stomach. "Initial information clearly points to political motivation," he added. Unconfirmed local media reports said that the suspect was a 71-year-old writer and political activist. Slovakia's outgoing president, Zuzana Kaptuva, said something so serious had happened that we can't even realize it yet. "The hateful rhetoric we witness in society leads to hateful acts," she added. Mr. Kalinek and Mr. Estok blamed the spread of hate speech on social media for the shooting and urged citizens not to respond to hate with hate. Mr. Estok accused the media of contributing to the climax that led to Mr. Fico's shooting, telling a press conference, "Many of you were those who were sowing this hatred." He added that protection would be provided to constitutional officials as well as other groups who could be subject to similar attacks, including journalists and public figures. Mr. Fico, 59, returned to power in Slovakia after elections last September at the head of the Populist Nationalist Coalition. His first few months as prime minister had proved highly continuous politically. In January, he halted military aid to Ukraine and last month pushed through plans to abolish public broadcasters, RTVs. Thousands of Slovaks had protested against the proposed reform of the public broadcaster in recent weeks. However, a planned opposition-led demonstration was called off on Wednesday as news of the shooting emerged. Parliament was sitting at the time of the attack, and Slovak media reported that a party colleague of Mr. Fico's shot an opposition MPs, accusing them of stoking the attack. President-elect Peter Pellegrini, who was politically ally of Mr. Fico's, said he was horrified to hear of the attack and also blamed the shooting on recent political divisions, describing the attack as an unprecedented threat to Slavic democracy. He said people did not have to agree on everything, but there was always ways to express disagreement democratically and legally. World leaders have also condemned the attack on Mr. Fico. U.S. President Joe Biden condemned the horrific act of violence and said that the U.S. Embassy was in close touch with the Slovakian government and was ready to assist. Russian President Vladimir Putin said there could be no justification for this monstrous crime. European Council President Charles Michel said nothing can ever justify violence or such attacks. Thank you for joining me today.